Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Christina, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you flip-throughs of two ancient civilizations curriculums, ancient history curriculums that I'm going to be using with my kids. We are going to be blending two different curriculums for focusing on ancient history, and that is Ancient Civilizations from Gather Round Homeschool, which is a unit study style approach, family style, unit study style approach. Very different, but I've used both Gather Round and units from the Peaceful Press, and I have loved both of them. And so I am looking to blend these. And while I don't have my exact plans for how I'm going to blend them yet, I can share those in a future video as I take some time to sift through kind of where these line up and where these fill in the gaps for one another. I did want to show you a flip through so that you can get an idea if either one of these or both might be a good fit for you for the remainder of this year, for curriculum for you for next year, and all of those things. These will likely take us through to next school year unless I choose to go more at the pace of Gather Round, which is a 20 lesson pace. However, because I know that we will be supplementing with the Precious People, or at least blending them, I don't know which one will become more of the dominant curriculum or if they'll be sort of equal. But if we go more at this pace, it's very different. This is a full year curriculum. This one is 20 lessons depending on how you break it up. We did do Playful Pioneers, which is their American history curriculum from the Peaceful Press, which is also slated for a year, and we took our time and it took us over a year. So this is a literature and project based. So this is a literature based, project-based curriculum, very Charlotte Mason style. So very different styles, but I really love both of them a lot. So I'm going to share with you a flip through of each of these so that you can see if you might be interested in either one of them. Let me know down in the comments below if you've used either one of these and if you liked it, maybe the pros and cons, to give some perspective for anybody else, including me, that might be looking into these curriculums. Okay, first we're going to take a look at Ancient Civilizations. This is the teacher's guide, but there are also the student level notebooks. So I'll give you a peek at a few pages from some of those so you can get an idea of those as well. But for the teacher's guide, you have your table of contents. You can see it's 20 lessons, and then it tells you the topic of each lesson. You have your main recitation passage for the unit. And then for lesson 1, it starts with a prayer. You have your reading, kind of just little you should know areas, activity breaks. How do we study history? So thinking about how we study history, another did you know section. There are images. You can see it focuses on the first civilization, the flood. So I like that this is biblically based, focusing on ancient civilizations. And then keeps going through humanity starting over after the flood, an extension activity, an optional timeline activity, and then it prompts your children to go to their student level notebooks. And then for you as the teacher or the parent, tells you that you have this at a glance section, which is basically your answer key, quick at a glance answer key for all of the different student level notebooks, depending on what kids you have in each. So this gives the day at a glance of what they'll be doing. So they have their notebooking, they have social studies and history, they have some language arts, some science, and some art. So for early reader, it shows you any answers that you might need to reference. Same for upper elementary. So this is early reader and early elementary, upper elementary, and then middle and high school. You can see this is a bit more involved for your older kids. And then it follows this same pattern through. So lesson 2, you have the prayer, you have lots of readings and some images to go along with it. Things to remember. This goes over the Tower of Babel. There's a Bible break, another optional timeline activity, and then you have your answer key. So this is also helpful if your child's struggling or confused about a specific thing. Obviously, you can look onto their copy, but you can reference the notes here because sometimes that's helpful, especially if you haven't looked ahead. So this is really great A really great open and go curriculum that does not require you to prep or read ahead of time. So you're learning alongside your children. So lesson 3, same thing. So lots of readings that you can choose to break up however you want. I've heard some parents say that they have their older kids read it independently, and then they just kind of have them summarize for the younger kids. And that's a great way for them to kind of read independently, but then also narrate or summarize the important points. What we tend to do is myself and my oldest 2 children, and probably my oldest 3 now that she's a little bit bigger, since the last time we've been using Gather Round, we will probably take turns reading sections and talking about them. You can break them up over a number of days, so you don't have to do 1 lesson a day if that's not what works well. And then again, moving through their student pages, and you have the page to reference with the answers. And then lesson 4, same thing. This one's focusing on pharaohs and pyramids. So this just gives you an idea. All of your readings, other than any suggested books, so you don't need to use anything outside of this curriculum. So this is a main difference between the style of the Precious People and Gather Round. This is a unit study that includes everything you need in here. And if you want to add in books, which is something that I do like to do, you can do that, but you don't have to gather any other resources. So it has images, it has texts, it has the student level notebooks as far as the independent work goes. So everything is structured for you and doesn't really require any prep, especially if you choose the printed copies or if you're printing ahead of time. You really shouldn't have any daily prep. So I only printed through lesson 4, and then I ended up clicking print on the whole thing and then deciding that I wanted to not print the whole thing right away because I didn't want to run out of ink. So I had a bunch of other stuff that I was printing as well. So I stopped it. So I do have like some towards the end, but I really only printed up to lesson 4, which is about a week or even 2 for us. And then I'll just print more as I go, but it really just follows the same pattern. So that's really enough to give you an idea of how the teacher's guide is set up and what you can expect. And then, like I said, for any of the lessons that I did not show you or flip through, the table of contents tells you everything that is included in terms of the topics that will be covered in this unit. So let me show you some of the student level pages so you can get an idea for what your different age children will be doing in their student notebooks for their independent portion of the lesson. There are 6 different levels of the student notebooks: pre-reader, early elementary, upper elementary, middle school, and high school. So I thought giving you a side-by-side instead of flipping through each one at a time might actually be helpful in thinking about the differences between each level, as well as the similarities and the connection points between them. I went ahead and printed every single level just to share with you guys, but I'll definitely be using pre-reader. I'll definitely be using middle school for my 12-year-old, high school for my 16-year-old, and then I'm going to be deciding between these 3 for my 8-year-old. So as I look through them even more closely with you guys, I might have more of an idea. I might let her take a look. The other thing is you can mix and match. So if you find some pages are a better fit at one level, some pages are a better fit at another level, that's always something that you could decide to mix and match, especially if you are printing your own versus ordering in print. So I'm going to just show you how they're set up. After the title page or the cover and the copyright page, you just have this welcome to students page, and these are the same across all student level notebooks. So for your older kids, you may choose to have them just read it quietly, or if you have all different age kids, maybe you decide to read it to all of them while the older kids follow along. But this is the same in each of the levels. And then the next page is the same for all of the levels except for pre-reader, who has a coloring page, which is pretty cute. This is just a note to the teacher explaining how the Seatwork pages can be used. And I'll show you guys those in just a minute. But these are kind of optional, and you can choose if these are a good fit for your children or not. So next up, you're just going to have the table of contents. And this also is the same across all levels. For the most part, you're going to see what they're doing each day. So this is not going to be the same across all levels so I think some of these things I just actually placed out of order, so you can ignore that for the moment. But this is the table of contents, and as you can see, for pre-reader, they just have 2 pages a day. They will have a coloring page and then 1 other page every day. For early reader, they will have 5 pages, and this is the same for all of the different levels. We'll have 5 pages of work to do, but they will vary across the different levels what exactly they're doing, and then it'll show you this color-coded key for what subject each of those pages is covering. And then that will continue across all 20 lessons, and then there is an appendix as well. And then there is the scripture passage for you to recite together each day. So really working on memorizing scripture, and this is the same in all levels. So now we get to the Seatwork pages. So this will be interesting to see side by side. These Seatwork pages are the same across each week. So week 1, you could print 1 for each day of the week. You could decide to have them do it just once a week. You can print 1 and laminate it so that it can just be reused over and over. There are many different ways that you can do this, but I just want to show you the differences across each level for the Seatwork page. Now, pre-reader is the only level that does not have a Seatwork page. They just jump right into their 2 pages for lesson 1, starting with the coloring page. And this is nice because it gives them something to color while you're reading the lesson, so they're not getting too antsy and bored. And so for early reader, they have their copy work, which is Deuteronomy 6:4. They have their spelling focus, spelling words, history, calendar work, something they're working on for the week, and then they have their checklist for each week. And then just to show you what that looks like on the back, so they're a place to write their name, to practice writing their name. Their copy work is a tracing, and then all of those things mentioned on the previous page, like the calendar work and things like that, they have a space to fill that in. So a step up from there is early elementary, and so they have that same copy work. They have a different spelling focus. They have a very similar history excavation, something they're working on. The checklist is the same, and then the calendar work is also the same. And then this looks very similar for them for where they're filling that in. So that is early reader versus early elementary. Then you have upper elementary, and if we just get a side by side, you'll see that the copy work is a bit longer in the upper elementary. Then they have their spelling focus, more complicated spelling words, very similar history excavation, more in-depth about character training, more focus on an in-depth schedule, and then they also have their checklist. And just to show you the differences and what this looks like, they're not tracing anything in upper elementary. They have their copy work, which is longer and is just freehand. And then their schedule is more focused on their schedule throughout the day versus like the day of the week and what month it is and all of that. For middle school and high school, just to give a side by side and also compare with the previous level, they have the same amount of copy work to copy. And then they both have spelling words, both have current events. And then for schedule, that is going to look just a little bit different. And then there is the history, excavation. And then let's take a look at how this plays out in each of these. So you can see for the middle school seat work, they have a place to write about current events, a place to write their schedule, and then at the top they have their copy work. And this part is identical for middle school and high school. So let's take one last look at these side by side. So you can see this one looks much closer to, so upper elementary looks much closer to middle and high school. And then you have your early elementary and your early reader. So next up, you're gonna have your first page that they're completing for their independent work after reading the lesson together for the day. So for lesson 1, the first page that each of them has to complete is kind of like a notebooking page, except for, like I said, for your pre-reader, which is going to be a coloring page. So notebooking for ancient civilizations is a history focus. So they do have a little bit of coloring the archaeologists. They have some matching and some identifying by circling. For early elementary, they're doing some drawing, some labeling, and some writing or drawing or dictation. Then for upper elementary, they're also doing some drawing, some explaining, and then some cultures that have a similar worldwide flood story. So a little bit more of kind of history and apologetics focus and discussion. And then for middle school, they are describing a childhood memory, 3 reasons why we study history, and then some things that archaeologists have discovered. And then for high school, they're explaining what history is, what the elements of a civilization are, what a reliable source is, and then something interesting from the lesson. Moving on to their second page for lesson 1 for high school. So kind of go in opposite order. For high school, it is a social studies and history focus. They're doing some research about timelines, what it is, if historical dates have been recorded the way they are today, who was Dionysius Exiguus, what is he famous for? So all of these different things that they'll be doing through research, and then there is an optional extension activity. And then for middle school, they're also talking about timelines, but it doesn't look like there is any research to do. So high schoolers are going to either use the computer unless you've pulled articles or books where they can research ahead of time. Then a step down from that is also some work with timelines, just more on their level. So talking about what BC means and AD means, and then doing some timeline labeling, some practice actually timelining. So that's upper elementary. And then early elementary is doing something very similar to that. So you'll notice there's this same page alert. And then they'll know that there are other levels that do the same page or almost the same page, which is really nice because then they can pair up and work on that together, even if they're not on the same level. So you can see they're doing almost the same thing. This one just has like a little bit more support for that age group. And in the teacher's guide, it will also tell you which levels have the same page. And then same thing for early reader. Their page looks like this is exact to early elementary. So those 3 are very similar. And then for the second page in pre-reader, which will be all they have for lesson 1, this is going to be the same page with another one of the pages because there is a same page alert, but it is not the second page in everyone else's journal. So let's see if it lines up with the next page. Not quite yet, but that's okay. So next up in early reader is going to be language arts. And so this one is focusing on understanding what you're reading, so reading comprehension. Early elementary looks very similar to that. Maybe even exact. I'm surprised that doesn't have a same page alert on it. And then for upper elementary, still looks very similar, but there is more writing, less illustration, but same concept. And then it looks like the very next page for middle school is completely different, even in terms of subject. So for middle school, there is a history focus here, looking up more timeline, dates, and information, and then having an extension activity. High school is moving on to language arts. They are focusing on research and reading comprehension. And then next up for high school for lesson 1 is a science focus. And this is doing some research. And you get to choose, it looks like you choose from those optional topics about the flood. The next page for middle school is also research and reading comprehension, like the previous page on high school. And this is all about forming a research paper. So it looks like they're learning about the steps for conducting good research. A step down from there, in upper elementary, you have a same page alert. This must be with previous levels. So this is science, building a simulation. So some kind of simulation with mountains and water. And so let's take a look at the difference between that page and early elementary. It looks almost the same, but there is more writing in upper elementary. And then for early reader, let's see what we have here. Almost the same, but no writing. So they are included in on this simulation and discussion. And then it looks like almost the same page for pre-reader. So pre-reader next is going to be in lesson 2. They have a coloring page. For early reader, they are still in lesson 1, but they are focusing on art analysis and appreciation. And this actually says time capsule. So some focus on the time period and preserving history. It looks like early elementary is doing something very similar. Upper elementary doing what looks like the same thing as early elementary. Middle school is still working on language arts, research and reading comprehension. And then high school does have art here. And then middle school actually has 2 more pages than the other levels, which I find really interesting. Maybe it's because they're doing less research, so it's more, it's not less work than high school, but more pages. And so they have a science page about floods, and this does have them either watching a video, reading a book, or searching online more about floods. So you could, if you didn't want them searching online, you could simply prepare some articles or videos or books for them. And then they also have some art, which looks almost the same as high school, focusing on a time capsule. Looking at their pages for lesson 2. So for pre-reader, they did have that coloring page. Then this is their second page, and this is a focus on social studies with the topic of survival. And there is that same page alert. So although it's not the first page in the other levels, it must align with one of the pages, one of the 5 pages that the other levels will be doing. So for early reader, it is a notebooking page focusing on some mapping and like the Fertile Crescent and Cradle of Civilization, which is very similar to the early elementary and upper elementary, just more writing. And then for middle school and high school, you have them focusing on some more research for high school, researching the earliest people as nomadic groups. They're going to sketch and label a map. Middle school is also sketching and labeling a map. And then they have a Venn diagram here versus, and then this will support their research a little bit, helping to give them a graphic organizer, visualization. And then both high school and middle school have this reading and reflecting section. Next up for their second page, high school will be focusing on social studies and weather and shelter. There's a hands-on option to build a miniature shelter. Middle school looks like it is exact. For upper elementary, they are also focusing on shelter, and it looks like it is exact with early elementary. There's that same page alert. And then for early reader, they're doing some matching with shelters. Pre-reader has a cut and paste, but all focusing on shelter. So that's why they have that same page alert. Not sure why these guys don't have a same page alert, but I love the opportunity for them to work in pairs. I love that there's this combination between like reading the lesson together, having them do things independent, but then also having them do things in pairs and in groups. I like the combination of those different things. So for their next page in high school, there is a history focus on nomadic people, a reading, and a little bit of writing, some listing. And this looks almost the same in middle school and high school. So for upper elementary and early elementary, they also have a reading about nomadic people, just a little bit of a shorter reading. And then very similar for early elementary. And then for early reader, again, very similar. So they're not doing the reading, they're being read to, and then they can color the pictures on here. And then for pre-reader, that's all they have for lesson 2, and then lesson 3, they have their coloring. So moving on, in lesson 2 for everyone else, early reader, their next focus is language arts and grammar, looking at rules, verbs, some practice. Early elementary is also looking at verbs through their language arts and grammar page. Upper elementary is looking at subject-verb agreement. So all focusing on grammar and verbs so far in those 3 levels, but just at their own level. For language arts for middle school, they're looking at sources. So kind of building on that research knowledge. And then for high school, they're focusing on grammar, language arts and grammar, looking at concrete and abstract nouns. And then lastly, in lesson 2, they have their art, which is a ziggurat architecture, and then there is an optional extension activity for looking at a video about how they were made. And then this is pretty much the same across the board from early reader to high school. And then again, that is just the coloring page for lesson 3 for pre-readers. So I feel like that gives you a pretty good idea without going through more of the lessons. You can kind of see the structure of how they are formatted and how they are similar and different across the different levels. Okay, now let's take a look at the Precious People. So this is, as you will see as I look through it, very different in how it is set up. It is very different visually because this is not the core teaching tool. This is more of the guide, whereas the teacher's guide for any Gather Round lesson is it really is your curriculum. So this is more of a curriculum guide. So the Precious People, you have your cover, you have the master book list, which I think is super helpful in just planning ahead for what books you might want to purchase, what ones you already own, which ones you want to check if your library has. And then these pages here, these break it up by the week, which books you'll need when, which is super helpful in thinking about when you might need each of these books so you know which ones to prioritize. As you can see, this is a 30-week curriculum if you follow it the way that it is designed. And then there are all of these pages in the beginning that I really think are helpful, especially if you are not familiar with the Peaceful Press and how their curriculums are structured and utilized. So you have these welcome pages that explain how to use this curriculum, the different topics that it has you cover, whether within or outside of the curriculum, a whole reading about your daily flow, a sample schedule. This is not what they're saying you need to do, but it just gives you an idea if you do need help with a schedule. This helps you in understanding the grid that they give you for each month and week. These are all of the categories that are in the grid. So all of the different subjects that are covered in a variety of ways. This talks about the student sheets. So this right here is just the parent guide. And then there are different leveled student sheets for copy work. So there are illustrated copy work. There are some that have the simple line drawings that they can color in, or the ones that are plain. They also have them in cursive, in print, and in more of like a kinder print. There are recipes. And then here are just some final thoughts to help you, just kind of inspire you and get in the right place before teaching your child. And then this is all about Sabbath, which is something that's talked about because we are looking at ancient civilizations. So you're looking at the Jewish people and other aspects of history. So because this is focusing on ancient civilizations and ancient history, it covers a lot of Jewish history, which also looks at biblical feasts, Jewish feasts, and Sabbath. And so this is a note on Sabbath. This is about learning to rest. And then celebrating the Jewish New Year. So these are just some articles about those different topics. And then you get into your monthly plans. So month 1, for each month, it shows you the main topics that will be covered. And then it gives you a supply list for your books that you'll need, free reading suggestions for the different age ranges, school supplies you might need, craft or hardware store supplies for the different projects, and then kitchen supplies for the recipes. Each month has a hymn that you study and sing, and then you have a weekly reading of Aesop's Fable for each week of the month. So these are the 4 that are covered throughout month 1. Jewish New Year, the Lord's Prayer, more Jewish feasts, and then this poem, The Harvest. Then you get into your weekly plan. So you have this weekly grid for each week of the curriculum that breaks it up into the different days and the different subjects. It tells you if there's a book you're reading, which chapter to read of chapter books that you'll be reading. And then like your Bible readings, what art or practical skills you'll be working on, language arts, what you're doing for readings and copy work. And then for math and phonics, spelling, and grammar, you'll see that this is blank because this is not covered in the curriculum. They do give suggestions for resources that you may want to use, but those are kind of your choice. And then you could use this to fill them in or not, depending on if you like that style of planning. And then you have your daily plans. So it gives you in order for your morning time, singing the monthly hymn or favorite chorus, your Bible time, prayer, read aloud, language arts, science or history, and then like even builds in a break time, and then their seat work like their math, their phonics, spelling, and grammar, their free reading, and then their practical skills or art. And that just follows the same pattern for 4 days out of the week, and Fridays are left free. So you'll notice for week 2, they do give a Bible reading for Friday. So if you still want to have that kind of morning time devotions, you have that. But it's a really great time to either just, have more of an unschooling day or go on a field trip or use this day to catch up on any things that you didn't get to, like different recipes or art projects or independent work, to just kind of use that as a day to catch up. And then it follows again that same weekly plan all the way through the month, week 4. And then I only printed the very first month, but every month is going to look just like that, just different, obviously different information filled in. What I chose to do, because there is a whole recipe book that you could print separately and bind separately, or just, choose to print out as you need them. I did choose to print out all of the recipes and just put them in the back of here so that I have them when I need them. I used to with Playful Pioneers, I would just print them as I went, and I just found it to be a little bit annoying. So I was like, this time I'm just going to print them all ahead of time and stick them in the back of the book. So that's just an idea for how you might want to do that. And then I did the same for artwork, where I would just print them as I went. And sometimes it annoyed me. I like them to be on cardstock because I just feel like you get better just depth of color and detail on the thicker paper. But I only printed week 5 because there wasn't an art study for weeks 1 through 4. And I also didn't used to bind them. I would just tuck them into the back, but then I would end up like with these loose papers and all of these things. So I ended up just putting it in here. It's easy to zip these in and out with a binding machine. So I think what I'll do is each month, I will print what I need for the month, including the art pieces, and stick them in here. As you can see, this is only the intro materials in 1 month. So this ends up being, and plus the recipes, it ends up being pretty thick. So that's why I didn't choose to have the entire year printed, because it would just be really big. So I'll probably just do like a month or so at a time and then go from there. So I hope you found that helpful, seeing a little bit of a peek inside each of these curriculums for ancient history, ancient civilizations. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any other questions about these curriculums. I will link them down below for you in the description box so that you can easily find them. If you have a favorite ancient history or ancient civilizations curriculum that you've loved, definitely put that down in the comments below as well. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you soon in one of my next videos. Until next time, stay rooted.